It started like most stories of betrayal do, quietly, with smiles that seemed genuine and words that dripped with support, encouragement, and admiration. I didn't see it at first because I didn't want to. When you're working hard for something, building your way up from the ground with nothing but grit and long nights, you crave the belief that people around you actually want you to succeed. I believed that he did. He was always there, offering advice, patting me on the back, even laughing with me when I stumbled. I thought I had found not just a friend, but someone who understood what it meant to chase after a dream with the same hunger I carried in my chest. But beneath that mask of brotherhood, he was watching, studying, waiting. My idea wasn't born overnight. It took years of small failures, countless trials, sleepless nights, and moments where I wanted to give up entirely. It wasn't just a project. It was the embodiment of my persistence, the kind of thing that comes only from living through disappointment after disappointment until you finally strike gold. When it all began to take shape, I shared pieces of it with him, bit by bit, because I thought he was on my side. I thought he understood. What I didn't realize was that every time I opened my mouth, I was handing him the blueprints to everything I had built. He was taking notes silently, carefully, and behind the scenes, he was putting together a copy. Cheap, rushed, desperate, but still close enough to mine to fool those who weren't looking closely. The first time I realized something was wrong was when I heard my own words being echoed back to me in a meeting, except they weren't mine anymore. He had claimed them, passed them off as if they had come from him, as if he had been the one burning midnight oil and pouring sweat into the process. My chest tightened that day, but I held my tongue. Maybe it was an accident, I told myself. Maybe he hadn't meant to. Then it happened again. And again. Until one morning, I woke up to see him standing in front of people, presenting what I had built from nothing, with my ideas dressed in his voice, my foundation painted over with his name. The sting of betrayal has a way of clearing your vision. I stopped making excuses for him. I stopped giving him the benefit of the doubt. What he wanted wasn't friendship, wasn't collaboration, it was theft. He thought if he could move fast enough, if he could sell the story before I did, then the world would believe it was his. But what he didn't count on was that success, real success, can't be stolen. You can mimic the shape of it, repeat the words, try to wear it like a borrowed suit, but it never fits. He didn't have the substance. He hadn't endured the storms that had forged me. He hadn't failed the way I had, hadn't bled for it the way I did. And so, while his version looked shiny for a brief moment, it crumbled quickly under the weight of its hollowness. People began to notice. They saw the cracks, the inconsistencies, the way his explanations faltered when pressed for details. They noticed how, while I kept moving forward with fresh ideas, he was always one step behind, scrambling to catch up, echoing my progress instead of leading with his own. His desperation became obvious, and the admiration he had stolen turned into suspicion, then disdain. Meanwhile, I kept working. I stopped wasting energy being angry and funneled it back into my craft. I let my results speak louder than my outrage. And slowly, piece by piece, people came to realize the truth. They saw the difference between the one who merely tried to steal success and the one who actually built it with his own two hands. In the end, he failed not because I exposed him, but because he exposed himself. His shortcuts betrayed him. His greed betrayed him. And most of all, his inability to understand that success is more than appearances betrayed him. He tried to take what I had created, but all he managed to do was destroy his own credibility. My success, on the other hand, only grew stronger, more unshakable, because it had been tested, nearly stolen, and still stood tall. And though he still lingers on the sidelines, trying in vain to copy and compete, I know now that he'll never win. Because success built on betrayal is nothing more than a fragile illusion, one that eventually shatters. The day I finally understood the depth of his betrayal was the day everything inside me shifted. Up until then, I had been angry, hurt, even humiliated at the thought that someone I trusted could so brazenly try to take my place. But that morning, when I stood in the back of a crowded hall watching him present my work to strangers, watching him smile as though he had created it all with his own brilliance, something hardened in me. I realized I could either waste myself screaming at the injustice, or I could use his greed as fuel to rise higher than he could ever reach. It wasn't just the fact that he had tried to steal my success, it was how shamelessly he did it. He looked me in the eye afterward, clapped me on the back, and told me, "We'll make it big together." As though this was teamwork. As though betrayal could be dressed up as partnership. In that moment, I saw him clearly, a parasite, feeding off my effort, convinced he could keep sucking me dry until there was nothing left. So, I changed. I stopped telling him everything. I stopped sharing late-night thoughts, sketches, drafts, strategies. While he thought he was still outsmarting me, I was already 2 steps ahead. I let him have the scraps, the incomplete versions, the fragments that led nowhere. He mistook them for treasure, ran with them, and when he presented them to the world, they fell apart in his hands. People laughed behind his back. Some even looked to me, puzzled, asking if I had really been involved in the mess he was passing off. That was when the tide began to turn. But I didn't just sit back and wait for him to fail. I pushed forward harder than ever. While he was busy trying to replicate me, I was reinventing myself daily, creating what he could never anticipate. The truth is, originality terrifies thieves. They can only cling to what has already been done. They cannot survive the unknown. And so every time I stepped into a new idea, a new approach, I left him choking on dust behind me. His desperation grew visible. The more I succeeded, the more frantic his attempts became. He started cornering people, insisting that we had built everything together, trying to tie his name to mine like an anchor. But those who mattered had already seen the truth. They saw the difference between someone who lived and breathed the work and someone who tried to wear a stolen crown without the weight of having earned it. Failure didn't come to him all at once. It came in pieces, one lost opportunity, one broken relationship, one skeptical glance at a time. He didn't even realize it at first. He thought he could recover, that one clever lie or borrowed line would fix everything. But lies decay faster than truth, and soon enough, the stench of his deceit was impossible to ignore. By the time he finally looked back at me, truly looked, without the arrogance and the mask, he must have realized he had lost. Because I hadn't just survived his betrayal. I had thrived because of it. He gave me a rival to sharpen myself against, and in trying to take everything from me, he only strengthened my resolve. Now, when I stand where he once dreamed of standing, I don't feel pity for him. He chose this path. He chose shortcuts over sacrifice, imitation over authenticity, theft over loyalty. And in the end, he failed because he never understood one simple truth. Success can be stolen for a moment, but greatness can only ever be earned. I still remember the night it began, the night I handed him the keys without even realizing it. We were sitting in my cramped apartment, papers scattered across the table, my laptop humming with the weight of endless drafts. I had been working for weeks on an idea that felt like lightning bottled, something so fragile yet powerful that it kept me awake at night. He leaned forward, eyes gleaming as I explained it, nodding like he understood the weight of what I was building. "Man," he said, his voice thick with awe, "this is genius. No one else is thinking like this." I smiled. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that, finally, someone saw what I was trying to do. What I didn't realize then was that admiration can be the perfect disguise for envy. Over time, I noticed the little things. The way he'd ask me to repeat a line, then jot it down on his phone. The way he'd glance at my notes, pretending it was just casual curiosity. The way he'd always say, "We're in this together," though I was the one bleeding hours into the work while he merely hovered like a shadow. When he stole the first piece of my work, it was subtle. We had been talking to a group about ideas for the future, and out of nowhere, he repeated something I had told him the night before. Word for word. Everyone clapped, impressed. He looked at me, smiling as if to say, "Don't worry, we're both winning here." That smile burned into me. I told myself to brush it off, to be patient. But patience turned to regret when I found out he was secretly presenting my entire project to others, my blueprint, my research, my plans, without my name attached. He had the gall to stand there in a press suit, confidence oozing, and say, "This is my vision." When I confronted him in private, His expression didn't even flicker. "You're overthinking it," he said calmly, almost dismissively. "We're partners. What's yours is mine." I remember staring at him, my heart pounding. Partners? That was his justification for theft. It was in that moment I realized he wasn't just a friend gone astray, he was a predator. I stopped sharing after that. At least, not the real work. I gave him fragments, empty pieces that looked valuable on the surface, but led nowhere. He didn't notice. He swallowed them whole, convinced he was still fooling me. Meanwhile, I worked in silence. I disappeared into my nights, pouring myself into building something bigger, stronger, undeniable. Every stolen word he spoke in public became a reminder that I needed to go further, faster. The downfall came slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. I watched from the sidelines as he presented one of my ideas, a half-baked version I had intentionally left unfinished. He stumbled halfway through, unable to explain the details. Questions came, sharper and sharper, and his answers grew thinner, weaker. The crowd shifted uneasily, doubt flashing in their eyes. He laughed nervously, brushed it off, but the crack was already there. By the third time it happened, no one laughed with him. People whispered instead. They began to realize he was all show, no substance. And me? I stayed silent. I didn't expose him, didn't drag his name through the mud. I didn't have to. His own lies were dismantling him piece by piece. When I finally stepped into the spotlight with my finished work, the difference was undeniable. Where he had been vague, I was precise. Where he had been shaky, I was unshakable. Where he had borrowed, I had created. The room leaned in, captivated, as I spoke with the certainty that comes only from living every failure, every late night, every victory. He was in the back of the room that day, watching me. For the first time, his mask slipped. His face was pale, his jaw tight, his eyes darting like a cornered animal. He realized then what I had known for a long time. His theft had bought him only temporary glory, but my work, my truth, was untouchable. And when the applause came, it wasn't for him. It never would be again. I didn't just reclaim my success that day, I buried his illusion forever. Because he had tried to cheat his way to the top, but cheats always fail where it matters most.